Are you trying to start a nonprofit in California? Here are 8 things you need to know. Let's get into it. Hey y'all, this is Tiffany with Boss on a Budget. I help people start their nonprofits and raise money from the startup phase of their nonprofits. And I share information every week about how to get started, where to find startup money. If you want to join a private community of nonprofit founders who are raising money just like you, then comment join below and I'll send you the link to sign up. In this video, I'm going to share 8 things you need to know about if you want to start your nonprofit in California. As a heads up, I'm talking to people who want to be a 501c3 nonprofit and they want to be a public charity. Now, I'm using words that you may not understand, so if you need a little bit of foundational knowledge, I'm linking a video above that can give you some insight on some of the terms you need to know when you're starting a nonprofit. So this video is going to cover 8 things you need to know if you want a really detailed tutorial on how to start a nonprofit. I recorded a 40-minute video. I did it a few years ago, but it's still very relevant. If you need that information, just click the link above to get the video, and I'll also link it in the description box. But this is just like about the process with California. What are the things that are different? What are the things you need to consider, especially if you're starting in California, because states regulate how businesses run. So you need to really understand how the state expects you to operate or the requirements that the state has for you. So when you're starting a nonprofit, the first activities you need to do are around figuring out your name, what's your vision, what's your mission, getting your board members together, all of that. Once you have that information, then you can start going into the paperwork and figuring out the processes for actually starting the nonprofit business. Now, number 1, you need to consider your name. You need to make sure that your name is unique and make sure that there's no other business, whether they're a for-profit or a nonprofit, that there's no other business that's similar or the same to the name that you want to operate with in the state of California. So California allows you to do a name search so you can figure out what the names of the other businesses are across the state. I'm going to link that in the description box below so you can have it. California also allows you to reserve your name for up to 60 days if you need time to file the paperwork to officially incorporate your organization. You also want to do a national search because if you want a national reach and you want people across the states to recognize your name, you want to make sure there's not another business that's operating with your name. And so you check the trademarking database to make sure that there's no other business that has trademarked their name. And one of the reasons why you want to check that website is because they may come after you if they discover that you're using a name that's similar to those or that may get mixed up in the marketplace. And it doesn't matter if that business is in a whole nother state. Trademarking has a national scope, so they can go after anybody operating in the US or doing business in the US. So you just want to do your due diligence and do those checks to make sure that no one else is operating with that same name. Now, I have linked the website to do the trademark search in my free nonprofit startup checklist. If you want that checklist, just comment checklist below and I can send you the link to that as well, but it's also in the description box. The second thing you want to think about is the type of structure or the type of nonprofit. See, this is where California is different from other states. So they organize different types of nonprofit organizations. One thing you need to realize is that you're not just a nonprofit if you do charitable work. There are all kinds of nonprofits that don't have a charitable focus. There may be a homeowner association or there may be clubs or things like that. So those businesses operate to benefit their members, but they don't necessarily operate for a public purpose or to do charitable work for the general public. But they're still a nonprofit, and so you have to identify what kind of nonprofit you are in California. There are 4 main types that they use as categories. There are mutual benefit organizations, public benefit organizations, religious organizations, and common interest organizations. So you have to decide which of those big 4 categories your organization qualifies under. Typically, the people that I've seen who start nonprofits for charitable purposes, they fit under public benefit, but you need to do your research, and if you need to, contact the Secretary of State's office so you can get more information and more insight to help you decide the right category for your organization. The third thing you need to know about is your articles of incorporation. So your articles is a document that declares that you are establishing yourself as a corporation. So the type of organizations I'm talking about in this video are nonprofit corporations, but not all nonprofits are corporations either. So just know that you really need to understand what you're trying to do and what entity you want to be when you're starting a nonprofit. Most people that I work with are corporations, and so they would use the articles of incorporation to establish their business in the state of California. And that's basically declaring, hey, we're a business, this is our name, this is our charitable purpose, these are our incorporators, these are the people who are starting the business, and it's essentially that. Now, when you are applying for 501c3 status later, you just need to understand that there's specific language that the IRS wants to see on your state document. So what you submit to the state of California, if you know you're going to get 501c3 status with the IRS, you need to make sure that the IRS approved language is in that document that you're submitting to California. So California has its own processes and the IRS has its own processes, but they need to be aligned. So you need to make sure that you're including the language that the IRS wants to see, and that is also on the IRS website, which I'm linking below. The fourth thing you need to know about is any state licenses or permits. So as a nonprofit, you have to handle the administrative work, making sure you're incorporating the business correctly and submitting your reports. But there may be also things you're accountable for related to the type of work you do or the substance of your work. So for example, you may be operating a domestic violence shelter, and that may require a certain kind of license or certification in order to do that. Maybe you're a child placing agency and you work with the child welfare agency in your state or in your county, and they may want you to be licensed or approved or certified in a certain way. You may need a permit to operate in a building or operate certain services, or maybe you sell things. You may need other types of permits or licenses that are regulated either by the state government or your local government. So if you're starting your business in California, you need to investigate the county that you're going to be operating in to make sure there aren't any county level or local level ordinances or requirements to operate the things or the type of services that you want to provide. So the fifth thing you need to know about is your employer identification number. This is a number that you get from the IRS, which is the federal level, right? This is different from the state of California, but every nonprofit needs this number. It is like a tax account number, and it's completely free for you to get. Any business can get an employer identification number, but because you are a nonprofit business, you also need it. You need to know that that number eventually becomes your 501c3 number when you are approved for 501c3 status. That number doesn't change, so you need to do that first before you apply for 501c3 status. And that's the number that people are going to use to look you up in the database to make sure you're a charitable organization and all the things. So you absolutely need that number. One thing I'm going to say though, there are some people who will be like, I'm going to charge you hundreds of dollars to get your employer identification number and get you set up with the IRS. And when you hear the IRS, it can be really intimidating, and you may be like, oh, okay, let me pay this person just to handle everything because I don't want to deal with it. And while you're grown and that's your prerogative to pay for what you want to pay for, I'm here to tell you that it's extremely easy to get your employer identification number, and it is completely free. The IRS does not charge you for that. You can go on the website, you can apply for your number. It takes 5 minutes and you get it right away. If you need the link and other links to what I'm talking about, remember that I have a startup checklist. If you comment checklist below, I can send you that checklist so you can have it. The sixth thing you need to know about is charitable solicitation. So this is the process in the state where you have to register in order to ask for money, in order to solicit for donations. And this also includes gifts or grants from foundations, right? So you need to make sure you check with the Attorney General's office about the process to apply for charitable solicitation in California. And California wants you to apply before you ask for money, before you start receiving money. They want you to register. Just know that it's not just California that requires this kind of process. Most states, so 40 states, require that you register to ask for donations, or if you're getting contributions from an individual or an organization in the state, they will require that you register. They will require that you pay a fee. and it's usually a regular fee that you have to pay every year, and you have to report financial data back to the state to make sure that you're still doing charitable work and to make sure that you're legit, because they want to protect the residents of the state. In California, the fee is $50 for your initial registration, and then from there you reapply annually and submit your fee. There are some organizations who are exempt from this registration, but it probably doesn't apply to you if you are a public charity nonprofit, but it's worth taking a look to see if you're exempt, and you still need to follow their rules and their processes to make sure they know that you're an exempt organization. Number 7 is the statement of information, and this is also different from other states. So in California, once you initially submit your articles of incorporation, after that, within 90 days, you have to submit what's called a statement of information. And it's a very simple form. It just requires you to add the names of your directors and your officers and contact information. It also requires you to indicate the type of business that you have. It's a very simple form, but if you miss that deadline, you may incur a fine. So you just need to be mindful of that and include that in your timeline of starting a nonprofit in California. And finally, for number 8, what you need to know is how to apply for 501c3 status. So you would use form 1023 or 1023-EZ. The EZ form is the streamlined version of the 1023 form. I actually did an explanation of the EZ form, and I explained the differences between the two in this video that I'm linking above. So go ahead and check that out, because I went into a lot of detail, which I'm not going to go into in this video, but I will share that those are the two forms that you would fill, either one of those, in order to apply for 501c3 status with the IRS, because that's different than with the state. Doing this makes you exempt from federal income tax, which means that the money that you make as your income, as long as it's related to your charitable purpose, then you will not be taxed on that income. So the money that you bring in, you don't have to pay tax on that, as long as the money came from charitable activities that are related to your charitable purpose. Now, there are some caveats to this, but that's the general information that you need to know about the purpose of 501c3 status. And there are certain rules that you have to follow. You can't do a significant amount of lobbying. You can't endorse a political candidate, and you need to just make sure that your activities are in alignment with the purpose that you said in your application to the IRS. And you need to make sure that you file your annual 990 form so that you stay in compliance with the IRS. 501c3 status is the status that you need in order to really access grants and to access donations tax-free. In California, if you wait a little while before you get your 501c3 status, then you may be subject to income tax in the state. So you need to check with the tax board in your local area to make sure you're in compliance and make sure that you have the right timeline so you won't get taxed. As an honorable mention, the federal government in 2024 started initiating a requirement with filing the beneficial owners information report, and it requires every business to identify who the owners are of that business. And if you started your business in 2024 and beyond, then you have 90 days to file this report. Now, tax exempt organizations are exempt from filing, but you may not get your tax exempt status within 90 days. That's very likely. So you need to just make sure you contact the federal agency that's responsible for that report to make sure that you're still in alignment and in compliance and that you don't incur a fine. And it may require that in the meantime that you file that report just in case, so that you don't incur any kind of fine. Now, this is all very new, which is why I'm saying check with the people, because I know in the first year things need to get ironed out. But just make sure you're aware of that report and that you submit that report so there are no issues. And I'm also in the description box putting a link to the government agency responsible for that report so that you're aware of where to go and where to ask questions. So I hope this was helpful. This is a start, but there are so many great resources in the state of California, just starting with the Secretary of State's office to guide you through starting a nonprofit. So lean on your state resources. Check out other nonprofit organizations that have been designed and developed to help people like you who want to start nonprofits. And make sure that you develop relationships with those people and make sure you use the resources that are available to you. If you need help with your nonprofit, you can always visit me at bossonabudget.com, and I will see you in the next video.